Hello friends, my name is CA Tilochna Nirav Agarwal, a faculty at Navkar Institute. Friends, November 2020 RTP आ चुकी है. Our paper number 8, that is economics for finance. तो section B जो है उसमें economics for finance. Let us solve that today. So this will be very helpful for your November exams. So let us see कौन से क्वेश्चंस एक्सपेक्टेड है, विच क्वेश्चंस आर देयर इन आवर आरटीपी. यस फ्रेंड्स, सो आवर फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन इज फ्रॉम द फॉलोइंग डेटा कैलकुलेट नेट नेशनल प्रोडक्ट एट फैक्टर कॉस्ट. और इसके आंसर्स भी जो हमारे दिए हुए आईसीआई के हम वही रिफर करेंगे. नेट नेशनल, एनएनपी एट मार्केट प्राइस, जीएनपी मार्केट प्राइस एंड जीडीपी एट मार्केट प्राइस. We have given some information: operating surplus, mixed income, rent, profit, net indirect taxes, consumption of fixed capital, net factor income from abroad, and compensation of employees. So this is our first question, question number 1A. So we have been asked 4 things. फर्स्ट हमसे जो पूछा है डेट इज जीडीपी मार्केट प्राइस, जीएनपी मार्केट प्राइस, एनएनपी मार्केट प्राइस एंड एनएनपी फैक्टर कॉस्ट, राइट. सो टू कैलकुलेट जीडीपी मार्केट प्राइस वी विल यूज द फॉर्मूला कंपेंसेशन ऑफ एम्प्लॉइज प्लस मिक्स्ड इनकम ऑफ सेल्फ एम्प्लॉयड प्लस ऑपरेटिंग सरप्लस प्लस डेप्रिसिएशन प्लस नेट इनडायरेक्ट टैक्सेस. सो हम ये सब ऐड कर देंगे, कंपेंसेशन, मिक्स्ड इनकम, operating surplus, depreciation, net indirect taxes, and the total will be 4950. So our GDP market price comes to 4950 crores. Next, GNP at market price. So our formula will be GDP market price जो हमने ऊपर कैलकुलेट किया प्लस net factor income from abroad. So that is 4950 minus 50, that comes to 4900 crores. Next comes that is NNP market price, that is GNP market price minus consumption of fixed capital. तो हमने GNP market price ऊपर कैलकुलेट किया, that was 4900 crores and consumption of fixed capital that is 400 crores. So our answer is 4500 crores. And NNP factor cost or national income is equal to NNP market price minus net income from abroad. Net indirect taxes, that is 4500 crores minus 450 crores, that is 4050 crores. So कुछ नहीं है इसमें, हमें सिर्फ फॉर्मूला और जो अपने लॉजिक है, कंसेप्ट है, उस पर ही जाना है एंड वी हैव टू अप्लाई दिस फॉर्मूलाज, राइट. सो दिस इज द फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन. सजेस्टेड आंसर को ही हम रिफर करेंगे. सेकेंड क्वेश्चन, दैट इज क्वेश्चन नंबर 1B. That is A sells a used car to B. A अपनी used car B को बेच रहा है और 60,000 rupees रिसीव करता है. A is receiving 60,000. So how much of the sale proceeds will be included in national income calculation? This is second hand. So हम बोलेंगे national income calculation में ऑलरेडी इसको जब ओरिजिनल थी, जब फ्रेश थी तब बेचा था, तब काउंट किया था. अब वापस अपनी यूज कार बेच रहा है तो कैलकुलेशन में, नेशनल इनकम के कैलकुलेशन में नहीं आएगा. That you know. So national income is a flow measure of output per time period. For example, per year, and includes only those goods and services currently which are produced. That is produced during the time interval, that is during the year. The value of market transactions such as exchange of goods which already exist or are previously produced do not enter into the calculation of national income, that you know. No part of the used car sale proceeds of rupees 60,000 will be included in national income calculation because sale of a used car represents transfer of existing asset which was produced during some earlier year and was accounted in the national income calculation of that year. जब कार एक्चुअली प्रोड्यूस की थी तब हमने उसको ऑलरेडी इंक्लूड कर दिया था, अब ये वापस से ऐड नहीं होगा एज इट इज यूज्ड कार, राइट. So this is our suggested answer of question number 1B. Now next question comes question number 2A. An economy is characterized by the following equation. Consumption दिया हुआ हमें. This equation is given. Investment, government expenditure, tax 0, export 20, imports के लिए हमें equation दी हुई है. What we have to calculate? Equilibrium income and trade balance. Find equilibrium income and trade balance. So we know that income अगर हमें calculate करना है, we will apply this formula: consumption plus investment plus government expenditure plus export minus import. हमारे पास सब है, equation में हम रखेंगे. We will get income of 600. Trade balance देखें तो एक्सपोर्ट माइनस इम्पोर्ट दैट विल बी डेफिसिट. डेफिसिट में आ रहा है 20 रुपीज. दस ट्रेड बैलेंस इज इन डेफिसिट, राइट? यस फ्रेंड्स, नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन नंबर 2B. Explain with the help of diagram how an increase in the marginal propensity to consume impacts consumer consumption expenditure. How increase in marginal propensity to consume will impact your consumption expenditure. So we know that increase in marginal propensity to consume means it implies that proportion of income that is spent on consumption increases with an increase in income. Suppose for example, before person was having income of 10,000, now a person is having income of 20,000. So when income was 10,000, he was spending rupees 5,000, that is 50%, right? As his income is increasing, now he is spending 12,000, means now he is spending 60%. So proportion is increasing. So increase in marginal propensity to consume implies that proportion of income that is spent on consumption increases with increase in income. In other words, except for an income level of 0, at each income level, the level of consumption spending is now higher. The vertical intercept is unchanged as autonomous consumption remains unchanged, but the slope of the consumption curve would be higher. For example, this was the consumption equation 20 plus 0.6y. Now it changed to 0.8y. So for income of 200, so consumption is increasing from 140 to 180. So this was the second question. Moving to the next question, question number 3. Yes friends, question number 3A. According to Richard Musgrave, there are 3 branch taxonomy of the role of government in a market economy. Explain them. Market economy, that is capitalist economy. So according to Richard Gere, there were 3 branches of the economy. What was the role of government in a market economy? 3 main roles. So let us see the suggested. Richard Musgrave, in his classic treatise The Theory of Public Finance 1959, introduced the 3 branch taxonomy of the role of government in a market economy, namely resource allocation, income redistribution, and macroeconomic stabilization. So Richard Musgrave, in his book The Theory of Public Finance, published in the year 1959, introduced the 3 main important functions of the government, that was resource allocation, income redistribution, and macroeconomic stabilization. The allocation, that is first resource and income redistribution, they are micro, while this stabilization, economic stabilization, it is a macroeconomic function. So the allocation and distribution of functions are primarily microeconomic functions, while stabilization is a macroeconomic function. The allocation function aims to correct the sources of inefficiency in the economic system, while the distribution role ensures that the distribution of wealth and income is fair. Monetary and fiscal policy, the problems of macroeconomic stability, maintenance of high levels of employment, and price stability, etc., fall under stabilization function. So basically there are three main, that is resource allocation, income redistribution and macroeconomic stabilization. Now next question comes, that is question number 3b. Why do economists use the word external to describe third party effects that are harmful or beneficial? That is externalities, right? So externalities can be either positive or negative. So why do economists use the word external to describe third party effects? So economists use the word external to describe third party effects that are harmful or beneficial because sometimes what happens that actions of either other consumer or producer result in cost or benefits that do not reflect as a part of market price. Such cost or benefits which are not accounted for by the market price are called externalities because they are external to the market. Because of action of one person, we have it will affect us, right? That's why it is known as externalities. Or in other words, externalities are cost or benefits that result from an activity or transaction and affect a third party who did not choose to incur the cost or benefit. Externalities can either be positive or negative depending on the nature of the impact on the third party. Next question, question number 4a. Explain why do government provide subsidies and give few examples of subsidies. Why government gives subsidies? To promote production, to promote the production in the areas which are less developed, right? So government gives subsidies. So why do government give subsidies? And some examples. Subsidy is a market-based policy and involves government paying part of the cost to the firms in order to promote the production of goods having positive externalities. Or in other words, subsidy on a good which has substantial positive externalities would reduce its cost and consequently price, shift the supply curve to the right and increase its output. Higher output would equate marginal social benefit and marginal social cost is socially optimal. There are many forms of subsidies given by the government. Two of the most common types of individual subsidies are welfare payments and unemployment benefits. We know that unemployment benefits are given. Objective of these types of subsidies is to help people who are temporarily suffering economically. Other subsidies, subsidized interest rates on student loans, are given to encourage people to further their education. Next question comes, that is question number 4b. What is concept of price floor with examples? So price floor and examples of price floors, right? So price floor is defined as intervention to raise market price if the government feels that price is too low. So when government feels that prices are too low, government will interfere and decide the price. In this case, since the new price is higher, the producer will get a benefit. For a price floor to be effective, minimum price has to be higher than the equilibrium price. For example, many governments intervene by establishing price floor to ensure that farmers make enough money by guaranteeing a minimum price at which their goods can be sold for. The most common example of a price floor is the minimum wages. Government will decide the minimum wages, that this much wages employers should pay to their workers. Yes friends, next question is explain why do governments provide subsidies. Illustrate a few examples of subsidies. So, yes friends, subsidy is a market-based policy and involves government paying part of the cost to the firms in order to promote the production of goods having positive externalities. Or in other words, a subsidy on a good which has substantial positive externalities would reduce its cost and consequently price, shift the supply curve to the right and increase its output. So subsidy is a policy where government will give some relief to the person, and because of that supply cost will decrease and supply will increase. Two of the most common types of individual subsidies are welfare payments and unemployment benefits. Objective of these types of subsidies is to help people who are temporarily suffering economically. Other subsidies such as subsidized interest rates on student loans are given to encourage people to further their education. Next question is, describe the concept of price floors with examples. So what is price floor? Price floor means intervention of the government, and when the government will feel that prices are very low, then government will interfere to increase the price in the market, right? So price floor is defined as an intervention to raise market price if the government feels the price is too low. In this case, since the new price is higher, the producers benefit. For a price floor to be effective, minimum price has to be higher than the equilibrium price. For example, many government intervene by establishing price floor to ensure that farmers make enough money by guaranteeing a minimum price at which their goods can be sold for. The most common example of price floor is the minimum wage. This is the minimum price that employers can pay workers for their labor. Now next question, number 5, that is, the trade emissions permits are claimed to have certain advantages. So trade emissions permits are having certain advantages. What are the advantages, right? So trade emission permits are marketable license. These are licensed to emit certain quantity of pollutants and can be bought and sold by polluters. You can sell also that permit. So what happens under this method? Each firm has permit specifying the number of units of emissions that the firm has allowed to generate. Firm that generates emissions above what is allowed, if they are generating more pollution, then they are penalized with substantial monetary sanction, and these permits are transferred. That is very important. This is very important that these permits are transferable, and therefore different pollution levels are possible across the regulated entities. Permits are allocated among firms with the total number of permits so chosen so as to achieve the desired maximum level of emissions. By allocating fewer permits than the pollution-free level, the regulatory agency creates a shortage of permits, which then leads to positive price for permits. This establishes a price for pollution just as in the tax case. The high polluters have to, obviously, if the firm is polluting more, the high polluters have to buy more permits, which increases their cost will increase and makes them less competitive and less profitable. The low polluters receive extra revenue and they can sell their permit. If they have surplus permit, they can sell, which makes them more competitive and more profitable. Therefore, firms will have an incentive not to pollute. India is experimenting with tradable emissions permits in the form of Perform, Achieve and Trade scheme and carbon tax in the form of cess on coal. The advantages claimed for tradable permits are that the system allows flexibility and rewards efficiency and is administratively cheap and simple to implement and ensures that pollution is minimized in the most effective way. It also provides strong incentives for innovation, and consumers may benefit if the extra profits made by low pollution firms are passed on to them in the form of low prices. The main argument in opposition to the employment of tradable emission permits is that they do not in reality stop firms from polluting the environment. They only provide an incentive. See, this main point is that this trade permits is that they do not stop firms from polluting, but they provide an incentive not to do so. Moreover, if firms have monopoly power of some degree, along with a relatively inelastic demand for its product, extra cost incurred for procuring additional permits could easily be compensated by charging higher prices to consumers. Next question, number 6. Examine the influence of different variables on demand for money according to inventory theoretic approach. So this question is asking about influence of different variables on demand for money. So inventory theoretical approach assumes that there are two media for storing value. First one is money and second is an interest bearing alternative financial asset or bond. There is a fixed cost of making transfers between money and the alternative assets. Example, broker charges. While relatively liquid financial assets other than money offer a positive return, the above said transaction cost of going between money and these assets justifies holding money. Baumol said business inventory approach to analyze the behavior of individuals. Just as businesses keep money to facilitate their business transactions, people also hold cash balance, which gives an opportunity cost in term. If I am holding cash, there is an opportunity cost, that is I will lose my interest. Therefore, they hold an optimum combination. I have to hold an optimum combination of bonds and cash balance, that is an amount that minimizes the opportunity cost. Baumol's propositions in his theory of transaction demand for money hold that receipt of income, say Y, takes place per unit of time, but expenditure is spread at a constant rate. Excess cash over and above what is required for transactions during the period under consideration will be invested in bonds or put in an interest bearing account. Money holdings on an average will be lower if people hold bonds. So obviously money holdings will be less if people hold more and more bonds or other interest yielding assets. The higher the income, the higher is the average level or inventory of money holdings. More income means more money. The level of inventory holding depends upon the carrying cost, which is the interest cost. Foregone by holding money and not bonds, net of the cost to the individual of making a transfer between money and bonds, say for example brokerage fee. The individual will choose the number of times the transfer between money and bonds takes place. The average transaction balance holding is the function of the number of times the transfer between money and bonds takes place. The more the number of times the bond transaction is made, the lesser will be the average transaction balance holdings. In other words, the choice of the number of times the bond transaction is made determines the split of money and bond holdings for a given income. The inventory theoretic approach also suggests that demand for money and bonds depend on cost of making a transfer. An increase in the brokerage fees raises the marginal cost of bond market transactions and consequently lowers the number of such transactions. The increase in the brokerage fee raises the transaction demand for money and lowers the average bond holding over the period. This result follows because an increase in the brokerage fee makes it more costly to switch funds temporarily into bond holdings. An individual combines his asset portfolio of cash and bond in such proportions that his cost is minimized. Next, question number 7. How is the behavior of central bank in economy reflected? Explain. The behavior of central bank, which controls the issue of currency, is reflected in the supply of nominal high-powered money. Money stock is determined by money multiplier and the monetary base is controlled by monetary authority. If the behavior of the public and the commercial banks remain unchanged, the total supply of nominal money in the economy will vary directly with the supply of the nominal high-powered money issued by the central bank. So, the behavior of the central bank, which controls the currency, is reflected in the supply of the nominal high-powered money. Next question is question number 7b. Distinguish between M1 and M2. Find out M1 where a country has the following monetary asset. So you have to find M1 and M2. So just M1 is composed of currency and coins, as we know, with the people, demand deposits of banks and other deposits with RBI. M2 includes M1 as well as saving deposit with post office saving banks. So M1 is 900 millions and M2 will also include saving deposits with saving with post office. So if we calculate M1, it is 900 millions. In this question, M1 and M2 both have been asked, but in the solution only M1 is given. You can also calculate M2. Next, describe the different types of agreements that take place during the negotiation of trade. So during trade negotiation, what are the different types of agreements that can take place? So trade negotiations result in different types of agreement. It can be unilateral trade agreement, it can be bilateral agreement, it can be regional preferential trade agreement, trading bloc, free trade area, custom union, common market, right? So these are different types of agreement that can exist. In detail we are not doing, as you have already done the chapter. Question number 9. Into how many parts are FDIs categorized according to the nature of foreign investment? Describe them. So into how many parts FDIs are categorized? So based on the nature of foreign investments, FDI can be categorized into 3 parts: horizontal, direct investment, vertical investment, and conglomerate FDI, right? That you know what it is. Next question. What does the agreement on trade related investment measures stipulate? So what does the agreement on trade related investment measures stipulate? So agreement on trade related investment measures stipulates, establishes discipline governing investment measures in relation to cross-border investments by stipulating countries receiving foreign investment shall not impose investment measures such as requirements, conditions and restrictions inconsistent with the provisions of the principle of national treatment and general elimination of, so the restrictions should not be there. Next, question number 10. Countries Roseland and Daisyland have a total of 4,000 hours each of labor available each day to produce shirts and trousers. So let us see the answer here. We have to find absolute advantage and comparative advantage. So if we talk about absolute advantage, it is the Roseland, because you can see here the number of hours spent per unit on each good is 2.5 and 4, it is less. So Roseland has absolute advantage. And comparative advantage, we can find opportunity cost. Opportunity cost of Daisyland is low, so Daisyland has lower opportunity cost for producing shirts, therefore Daisyland has comparative advantage for shirts. For trousers, we talk about, it is Roseland, that is 1.6.
If you like this video, share it with your friends. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch more such videos and learn from our expert faculty members. Press the bell icon to get regular notifications whenever we upload a new video. Download NDI mobile app to get complete CA course online. We value your support. Thank you for watching.